Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, with us now. Secretary, always good having you. What do you make of, obviously, Ukraine trying to take advantage of this? I don't know how successful they are, but they see this confusion in Russia as an ideal moment to do so, is it?
Well, Neil, thanks for having me on today. Look, I'm convinced the Ukrainians have been preparing with enormous U.S. support and European support. They've been preparing for this summer, this campaign to retake their sovereignty, retake the land that Vladimir Putin has taken by force, committed enormous atrocities in so doing. And so I'm guessing that they're continuing to follow their strategic plan to try and advance to retake that. I'm hopeful that the United States and Europe will keep eyes on the prize, whatever it is that took place these past days in Russia. I think there's still a great deal of confusion about that. It couldn't have been good for Vladimir Putin, but we have to remember why America has a deep and abiding interest. I'm glad to see the Vice President travel there today. I hope he'll learn what President Zelensky is seeing and hearing and knows. And I hope the American people will remember that this is certainly important to vindicate the Ukrainian people's rights. But most importantly, this matters an awful lot to America to get this right. Xi Jinping is watching closely what's taking place in Europe today, and he wants to see if the West is resolved to protect human dignity, property rights, all the things, Neil, that have made America the special place and so unique for American citizens for a couple hundred years now.
You mentioned China, Secretary. Do you think it's embarrassed by everything that happened and went down last weekend?
Imagine they're disappointed. I don't know about embarrassed. I think Xi Jinping is almost unembarrassable. You should remember, he killed 7 million people across the world and didn't lose a wink of sleep over it. So I'm sure he is disturbed. I'm sure he's disturbed to see what happens when you give individuals too much power. Look, he faced the same problem with commercial leaders. Think of the senior leaders at Alibaba who were reined in when they got a little too big for their britches. I think Prigozhin had gotten a little too big for his. And so I think Xi Jinping is absolutely watching how an authoritarian puts down internal struggles and what it means when you go on offense to take a sovereign nation and the risk that that presents to your leadership as well.
You know, I didn't have the opportunity or pleasure of speaking with you post this crackdown, a near mutiny and some called a coup in Russia and Vladimir Putin's behavior. Some quickly seized on the fact that he fled Moscow for St. Petersburg, came back, but it was not exactly a Churchillian moment, nothing like President Zelensky staying in harm's way, opting not to fly out of the region or the country at all. And I'm wondering if that comes back to bite him. What do you think?
I think it's hard to know what's really going inside of Russia at any given time. I think those of us in the West, certainly those of us without access to classified information, I think we're often guessing about the internal dynamics there. But two things I think we can say with absolute certainty. This wasn't Vladimir Putin's finest day. You're right. Think about different decisions that political leaders make. Zelensky chose to stay. President Ghani in Afghanistan chose to flee. The country collapsed around him. Putin chose to leave, but he managed to get control back at least for a little while. This wasn't his finest moment. And second, I think you will see increased clampdown. There was already tight. It was already dictatorship. I think you'll see increased clampdowns inside of Russia to prevent the people from getting what it is they actually want. And so I think life is about to get more difficult for the Russian people as a result of what happened this past weekend.
And I'm wondering, you know, Secretary, we have our focus on the wrong guy. Everyone has been wondering where you've got any Prigozhin goes. I know that it's this standing line you often hear, don't go near any open windows. But you could almost say the same about Vladimir Putin. Should he be sleeping with one eye open? I mean, is this whole experience now exposing him to future mutinies, future potential coups?
You know, I suppose that's true, Neil. If I were an underwriter, I probably wouldn't insure the life of either of them, other than a really big premium. I think that's probably true. But we should also, in the West, make sure we're focused on the things that matter to America. Whether it's Prigozhin, whether it's Patrushev, the number 2 in Russia, whether it's Putin himself, the idea of greater Russia is deeply embedded in the Russian leadership. So the conflict in Ukraine today probably doesn't turn on Russian leadership. It probably turns on Western resolve. And so I hope America and Americans will understand that. We focus on these individuals. Russia decided to take another nation in 2014 by force, and it took a fifth of Ukraine. It stopped for 4 years while we were there, and they went back at it just in February of 22. We should remember that Russian leadership is focused on that. We can't let that happen. To have Vladimir Putin in control in Kyiv or in Lithuania or Latvia or the Baltic states, these were all goals of his. We can't let that happen. And second, I saw, there's going to be a NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania next week. I hope they'll focus on security. The Biden administration looks like it's about to give a whole bunch of taxpayer dollars to a big humanitarian rebuild. The appropriate role for the United States is to secure Ukraine's sovereignty. The Europeans need to have the primary responsibility in rebuilding that nation when this is all over.
Secretary, when I have you, I always like to end on a political question just to make you uncomfortable, but you never are. But I'm joking here. But Chris Christie has said, came out and said what was being thought among some of the Republican presidential candidates about rallying around whoever the nominee is. He said if it's Donald Trump, it won't be. He won't rally around Donald Trump. Others have expressed the same. Asa Hutchinson, I believe, a host of others hinting that they don't want to make such promises. As a Republican, how do you feel about that?
I can't imagine there being a worse candidate on the Republican side than President Biden. If you look at the future of America, if you look at taking care of the things that matter, confronting the Chinese Communist Party, getting our schools right, we had a great decision today from the Supreme Court, right? Validating the ability of individual liberty, not dividing people by race and color and creed. Those things, the Republican candidate will certainly, no matter who that candidate is, be better than President Biden. I hope not just every Republican, but Americans will see that and they'll support the Republican candidate in 2024 in November.
All right, you were obviously very alert answering that question, so maybe next time I'll get you at a tired, weak moment. I'm kidding. Mike Pompeo,
thanks, Neil.
Always an honor talking.
Have a good day. Happy 4th, too.
To you as well, my friend, and all your service to this country.